Well, good evening. I pray that your week has been good. We're going to jump right into our lesson. I pray that this lesson has been a blessing to you, and if it has, please share it, especially to those that you know that are in deliverance ministry. Listen, I want to go and jump right into the lesson and want to share, as I said I would, to talk a little bit about the rejection, because remember I told you this is one of the great roots that the enemy has been using for decades and generations. And one of the things that this spirit does, it keeps the people from really recognizing who they are and God's divine purposes for their lives. So this is a core area that we really got to look at, and we've got to assess really well before we begin to really start to send someone through deliverance. Now remember, this is only a pre-deliverance class, so I wanted to make sure that you understand that. So we're talking about tonight assessing the roots to rejection, okay? So we're assessing the roots to rejection, and we're going to assess those through these 8 ways that I talked about earlier on in our last lesson. So we want to look at these patterns, okay? And so these patterns are there because doors have been given access, have been given legal grounds, as we talked about in the very beginning of our lesson. So these legal grounds gave entrance for rejection to come in and actually live, which means to sit and to rest and to fragment the soul. And so hopefully after we finish this lesson, we'll get into a little bit about me getting into the teaching on our next session in regards to, really just rightly dividing what you need to understand in regards to the side effects for a fragmented soul, and how to discover and understand the real effects of what the soul. In other words, we're going to go over the soul function, the spirit, body, soul, and spirit, the true function of it, the divine function, and also look at those areas where things have fallen, where perversion has come into the soulish realm, and soul ties have been created, and because of the spirit of rejection. And so these 8 that I said I will give, I hope you got your pen ready. Number 1, we're looking at assessing where is this curse of destruction of the family, okay? Where is it centered? Where did it come from? Was the great-grandpa and the dad inherited, of course? And then number 2, where is the curse in the spirits of withdrawal from the father? The mother I talked about in our last session, about the mother being Jezebelic or having a dominant spirit. And so remember, when we have an Ahab father, many times the woman is Jezebelic. But we got to also remember, I talked about the kid's teeth being set on edge. Remember, when we have a bitter child, when we have a bitter father or a bastard father, or a father or a woman who is dealing with rejection, you have bitter children, okay? You have children who are going to be rejected anyway, 9 out of 10 in the womb. And so we have the bitter father. That means you have a bitter child. You have an Ahab father. Then 9 out of 10, you're going to have a passive son or daughter. And so we got to look at the curse of the withdrawal. We got to look at the curse, and this withdrawal is rejection. Number 3, when you look at the spirit of improper discipline. So that means it usually works through the mother, because most of the time they are very controlling, because 9 out of 10 that they may have had a passive father, and then the mother was controlling. And so there was improper balance of discipline in the house. And so these are some things we got to look at, whether or not the mother was very overpowering or over-permissive possibly, or too harsh, or the mother either was to the point that they associate this area of rebellion in that child, or the rebellion that may be going on between them could be part of being birthing a baby that was out of what they call their own time, or maybe the child was one that became a bastard child from some other man, and then they got married. Okay, so that discipline, which I call the sacrifice of the children, where they are mentally tormented and mentally abused and emotionally abused, because maybe the father who is not the child's father, or the mother who is not the child's mother, there's a lot of rejection going on. So we need to assess that area as well. Then number 4, the spirit of lying. They try to escape punishment. This is one of the things that have come, especially in children's lives. Of course, this is something that's generational as well. But the spirit of lying is always very prevalent because they're trying to protect, so they don't want to feel pain of rejection. They don't want to feel pain of having to feel that they have to withdraw from. They want to make sure that they stay included, so they'll start to lie or trying to find a way to escape any punishment or any pain of rejection. And then number 5, the curse of the spirit of guilt. Okay, that's another one. There's a guilt, and then also the fear of making sure that they don't be rejected. So the spirit of guilt, you got to look at and assess that. Then number 6, the curse and spirits of distrust. And most of that, of course, is resulting from the spirit of guilt, okay? And, there's one thing having a spirit of guilt, and then there's one thing is having a spirit of grief about something. Sometimes people have grief, and they may have guilt about something that they didn't do or they wish they could have done. So we got to look at where did the distrust come in at that was resulting from the guilt, okay? And then number 7, curse and spirits that's involving the lack of communication between the parents and the child. And so that a lot of that is going on because there's a lot of a lack of communication, even in marriages today, because they grew up in the house that was always very argumentative, and there was never any level of forgiveness. And so many times we'll have kids who are born into that, and so they become the same way, so they don't know how to communicate. They watch their parents close the door, go to bed angry. They don't know how to release things. So the same thing, we got to assess that. And then finally, number 8, the curse and spirits of rejection, which means that they find themselves so rejected to the point that kids that are alone, or I call them latchkey children, who take care of themselves after school, or those kids who are just totally ignored, and a lot of parents do what I call bedroom parenting, which means that you only talk to me at my door, or they feel that the parent don't love them, they don't want to talk to them, just want to feed them like puppies and, give them objects and things to pacify for love. And many of this is being found in a lot of people that have what they have best, blessed, and highly favored lifestyles. And we also find that in a lot of with PT kids, preacher kids, PK kids, preacher kids, who don't have anything to talk about unless you're doing something to make their image look bad. So then they want to sit down and talk to you then about what you're doing that's not holy. But this curse of the spirit of rejection is very prevalent with PK kids, because they feel like they can't even talk to them, or vice versa. The kids, the PK parents, grew up with the same type of mentality. So we got to work out to see where is this giving access for them to stay in this rejected mode, this witchcraft type of control mode. And, and the point of the fact that many types of witchcraft, my tongue is really tired today, many types of witchcraft control spirits will come in to try to seduce them, but most of this stuff is settled in the spirit realm from the womb. And so we're going to talk about that when we get into talking about the soul a little bit later on. But I wanted to also talk about areas of unforgiveness to make sure we understand that we got to get them to the level of forgiveness. And then I'm going to get into some grounds that you got to look at that we got to, talk to them about, is in regards to trying to process the rejection. Now, as you think about those people that are in their lives right now, or people in their family, whether it's cousins or even siblings, we got to look at these areas that many of them are looking at through the natural eye of what they grew up with, and their soulish realm that is fragmented from the pain of it. Then they become very rebellious. That includes they do things through their own eyes and their own self-will that they think is going to make them comfortable, or they become very stubborn. And so you find this generally because they become very bitter, because they don't think they can trust anybody. So they become very disobedient. They become sometimes very violent. And, when they become rebellious and violent, anything can come out of that. They can become very destructive. And now this is not just on the level for children. This is adults and across the globe. I don't care how anointed a person is. If they're not dealing with this spirit of rejection, which is a great, great root that has caused many, many people to act and behave in ways that they don't even realize that they're behaving and acting in. So let's jump into the second part of this lesson that I said I want to talk about, is talking about the grounds that's been given. Now, in the study that I did on the War on the Saints, I remember talking about, as it had described, about some evil spirits that we've been giving ground to. But many of these have been in the soulish realm for so long, people don't realize that these grounds that they've given them, their soul is calling for it. Their souls have become dependent for this thing. I think I described about how when my children's father tried to kill me, my soul was so entied with codependency and from rejection at home till I wanted to make sure that he stayed connected to me. Even though he almost had killed me nearly, I was still driven. It was not even my own will, knowing that I even want to be around him, and I was afraid of him. But my soul was entangled, because I was dealing with a whole lot of different areas that the nature and the character of man, how things originate in our soul, our mind, our will, and our emotions and our desires and all those things. We're going to talk about those, and we'll get to that soulish part. But I wanted to share how many people are today are blinded by the grounds that they have given the enemy access to put them in this place, to stay in this place of rejection. This is why we got to look at doing the assessment very keenly and timely. It takes time to do this. And this is not something that you can just go and think you keep laying hands on someone and it automatically is gone. The reason why many people are not staying clean spiritually and in the soulish realm is because these spirits already know that the people are very rebellious, and these are the areas that the enemy hides in. This is why it's only called surface deliverance when we don't deal with those areas at the root. This is why we got to make sure that we look at when we are assessing someone, whether it's counseling them or assessing them for deliverance ministry, you got to make sure that you look at the rejection. Where's the root of this matter? Where's the root of the rebellion? To find out those 3 R's that I talked about. Where is the root of bitterness? So we can look at the rejection, the root of bitterness, and the rebellion to see which one of these is causing them to willfully disobey what is right. And those things that so easily beset them is calling them, is crying out to them to go forth and give legal right and ground to rebellion. Now, the other part of this, we got to look at the counterfeit, okay? The counterfeit activities that the enemy has allowed people to do from what they have learned, religiosity, so they will perform this thing that appear to be godly. And so we'll look at those things that deceive them, that cause them to act a certain way, that they give ground to it. They'll look at ways that may be spoken to them in the spirit realm, and then the enemy likes to mimic, and the people don't even realize they're doing it, but they'll be mimicking what you're saying that sounds holy, and we will be seduced into believing that what they're saying, maybe they are getting it. But over the 45 years that I have been doing deliverance, I have seen spirits that literally try to talk to me like I'm really, really into this fake and this phony type of behavior that's really passivity, what I told you before early on when we discussed this, talking about the passivity of the mind. But they're very passive, and the worst part of this is because they are passive, they have a tendency to make you believe that this lightness of what they feel or feeling faint, many times the enemy will use that to let them faint so that you won't continue to lay hands on them. This is why you should lay hands on no man suddenly. You have to assess them, and you have to, most importantly, discern them. So the wrong interpretations of what they have received over their lives on this particular root of rejection from their generation, accepting the counterfeit, these fallen natures have caused permanent grounds. That means now we've got to uproot it. And some of these things take a while. They've become so perpetual in their lives into the point that it looks right. You got to look at Romans chapter 1, read it very clearly. They become very, very rebellious, and because they've become rebellious, they now believe that some things that we're saying to them are not right. But what has happened is that they have become covenant breakers. When you become a covenant breaker, there's great ground and great space for reprobate, okay? So we got to look at the acts that they've been doing, which means the behaviors. We got to see what grounds that they've allowed to come in. We've got to look at how the ground has been given. It's very important. So that's why we got to do the assessment on the generation. We got to do the family tree. So we'll get into the family tree later. But my main thing is to look at, we got to deal with the grounds that have been given. We got to find out okay, what they gave up on their own thoughts, on their own passivity. We got to make sure that we teach them how to pray and give them scriptures on what to pray. Now, we're still to pray against by name of the spirits that they have given legal ground to. For example, by name if you know you've been lying, by name if you know you've been deceptive, by name if you know you've been fearful, and so on, and doing things that are not, natural, such as having sex in an unnatural way. We don't even want to get into the fullness of that because I can't get into that class, to that fullness about the unnatural sex. It takes too long. But I think what's most important is to make sure that we understand that God wants us to realize that those unnatural things that are described in Romans chapter 1 is very important for us to know that we have given legal grounds to both for our own bodies to be defiled and the marriage bed to be defiled as well when we invite things in that are unnatural, when we invite things in that are ungodly, okay? And so we got to give them light to see how to deal with these grounds. And the most important part is to make sure that these things that they know are real, when you start to assess them and getting them to see them, now we got to make sure that they understand where it came from, giving them that prayer, and then make sure that they confess it, and renounce it. But many times, people don't want to call a spade a spade. And, if you're a liar and you're a thief and you like to masturbate and look at all these things, and we won't leave out the little simple things that we overlook, and that's like gluttony, because gluttony is a spirit, and it can become very demonic if you don't get a hold of it, because it'll get a hold of you. This is why a lot of us are sick with sickness and disease in a lot of different ways that have overtaken a lot of families, and they've given it names like diabetes and everything else. But we can control our own things. I thank God when I go to the doctor and get my checkups, when it's time for me to go so many times a year, my first thing is, Lord, I pray that none of these things come up on me because they will not attack me. Diabetes will not have this body. None of this stuff will have this body. And one of the things that me and my doctor, thank God I have a doctor that will say, she's always watched. Well, you like them cookies, because that's one of the areas that I glut on, and that's cookies. So I have to fight. It's not something that you got to just overlook. We already know what the enemy tries to do to kill us, so we've got to fight. Now, we need to look at to make sure that we face the truth. That's what I'm getting at. Lie is a ground. Lie is giving permission to come in for deception. So we got to make sure we discover it, look at it in detail, look at the full disposition of it, and look at the ground and the points of it that we've been deceived our own selves, that we deceived our own selves. Everything ain't the devil. Like the cookies and stuff, the devil ain't doing that. I'm doing that because I want to do this. And so we know what we want to do, but we got to make sure that the devil don't take full control over our bodies, our minds, our souls, and our spirits. So we got to be persistent, because the only way we're going to be persistent is the only way we're going to be able to get liberty from these things. So we got to teach them how these grounds can pass away gradually. And they gradually, some can be supernaturally gone, but we got to make sure that they don't return, because a lot of people allow these spirits to return because they have not been educated on how to make sure that they keep their lives free from the sins that so easily beset them, free from the generational things that try to come back and visit them because they've given them legal grounds and rights. And so how do we use this? Well, we got to make sure the first thing, as I said, to bring the recognition about these things that are dispositions in our lives and how they take place. In other words, how we get these grounds removed. That has to be processed. We got to look at how the holes are there and how to break the holes by the power of the blood and the cross of Calvary. And the only way you're going to do that is be able to take the time to speak to God about it and ask God to show you how to get this thing to stop, and to show them how to make sure that they process it through taking back their rights by the power of the blood through repentance, for not just for themselves, but for their family. And as I say, because it's a family matter, I repent for my children, and and I know that those things that are on them does not come to me anymore, because they are grown adults. They're responsible for their own sins and their own life and their own salvation. But I believe that because of they're my kids, I do the Job move. I repent for them too, and ask God to have mercy on them and give them, rights. Give them an opportunity to be able to live and not die and declare his works in the earth as well. So in this conflict, in this warfare that we have, we cannot afford to allow the enemy to trick us. We cannot afford the enemy to speak to us. We've got to speak to it and pull it down and destroy it and take the legal rights away from it, whatever your it is in your bloodline or in your own personal life. We need to be very watchful. I don't care how tired you get. I don't care how the enemy look like it ain't going to come out. We're going to talk about some of the areas that the devil try to have these strongholds to try to hold you down, and it look like they're not breaking. But guess what? Jesus is Lord, and he's greater than any devil and any principality and any spirit. And so these grounds that we have given on our own cognizance, the things that we already know, we can take back the rights, but it's up to us. So we got to teach the people that, how these grounds can be taken back, how these thoughts and these belief systems can be removed, how the enemy has to give up. And so these grounds, in order for them to give up, we got to admit them, because the devil already know what you like and what you don't know, what you don't like. This is the reason why a lot of marriages are jacked up today that should not be married, because the devil already know he was only with you because it felt good. Or the devil already know that this is what you like. You like the oral sex. You like the anal sex. You like to masturbate. You like to watch pornography. So the enemy already knows some people still like that, and they say they love God, and they fluently can preach very, very well. But I have counseled on many people who not only would have sex with their own children, but they would literally have sex with their own sheep and so on. We got to know. I don't want to preach. Every time I get to this part of the subject over my years, it just devastates me when I think about how we let the devil just duke us. Many of us know how to fight, but we won't. We keep giving the grounds, and then we think we're taking it away. The devil's sitting back laughing, going, okay, so now you are going to preach about being free. You're going to preach about, salvation. You're going to preach about worship. Really? And your hands ain't even worshiping God. You didn't worship God last night with your hands. You didn't worship God last night with your mouth and your thought and your eyes. Your whole being belongs to God. And so it's going to cost us. Yes, it is. Lord, I don't want to preach. But when we take our own mind and try to bring our own dispositions into what we think we have a right to, once you give your life to the Lord, it is over. You don't have no more rights to this body. This is why it's a fight every day with our mind, body, soul, and spirit. So I got to get off here. This is what we're going to talk about. I pray you got those nuggets down and talk about how these grounds can pass away, some gradually, and some are going to have to be uprooted with a fight because we have given it right too long. And so we've been comfortable in it too long. So we got the wrong interpretation in our mind, thinking we just put the oil on us and everything going to be all right and quote some scriptures and all that, and it's going to be over. I don't think so. Devil already know it, that it's not so, because he knows the scripture and he already know what yet's still working. Okay? Whew. I know I talk real fast here. But anyway, listen. I pray that you be with me next week. I'm going to be talking about discovering some side effects that many of the people who don't want to recognize that these side effects of these given rights to of the rejection of generational issues that have resulted to our spirits being nulled, our souls being fragmented. We're going to talk about that next week, how we got to make sure we assess these, how we can get people to see that consciously they're doing this stuff, not unconsciously. They're doing it deliberately, and we got to look at all this foul and all this guile of our soul that God is watching, saying, when you going to uproot it? When you going to really talk to that person about it? I put them to your hand, and yet you preaching to them, and you talking about you want to lay hands on them, and they're at the altar crying out, but yet you can't even see that Jezebel is in this woman, Ahab is in this man. You can't even see that demons are in these children. You can't even see that this person that you got over your women's ministry, over your, over your program, even following you as an armor bearer. I don't want to preach. I help today. That they got these spirits working on them, that their mind is passive and they're weak, and they have the wrong thoughts, and they're so depressed until they're mentally ill almost. Got to take a pill to get up and a pill to lay down. Listen. We got to admit the fact that we are all frail in some manner. And the only way we're going to be able to have the wholeness is we got to look at to see where's my soul fragmented. So next week we're going to talk about the soul and its function, okay? We're going to talk about the areas how God has created us and how God wants us to be whole in our spirit, soul, mind, and body. So we'll talk about that next week. We're going to get into what is soul, what is the soul, and how is this soul have caused us to have these obsessive, rejected thought lifestyles. Lord, help me today. We don't want to leave out perverted. All right? A lot of it is perverted because of where we've been. And frequently we see this perversion. We look at it all across the globe. It has caused us to be angry. It has caused many to rebel to the point that they are so angry and they're so tired of being rejected. They're so tired of being abandoned and not enough because they look like nothing is working and everything is a failure, so they want to kill. So that's the ultimate. Kill yourself or kill somebody. Lord, help us all. Okay? So I pray this has been a blessing to you. I pray that you'll make sure you check me out next week. And remember, I'm not 100 on anything. Neither do I have a cookie cutter message for you on here. I'm just going by from experience. And I believe a PhD and nothing else is going to matter. I don't care what 5-4 you have. But if you haven't had no experience with hell, I don't even want to hear from you. God bless you so much. I love you so much. I pray this is continuing to bless your life and your family and ministry. Please share the message.